There are places that don't exist on any map, and yet they shape who we become more than any city or country ever could. They aren't made of walls or streets, but of thoughts, emotions, and illusions. Most of us live our whole lives wandering through these invisible landscapes, never realizing we've become their prisoners. We wake up tired, anxious, hollow, and we blame ourselves. We think something inside us is broken. But what if the problem isn't you? What if you've simply been living in the wrong psychological neighborhood? There are 7 of these places, quiet destroyers of the self. They don't harm through violence or force. They harm through something far more subtle. They make you forget who you are. The Hall of Mirrors. The first of these places is what I call the Hall of Mirrors. Here, everyone around you reflects only what you already believe. Every conversation confirms what you think. Every voice sounds like your own. At first it feels comfortable, safe, no conflict, no disagreement, just the illusion of harmony. But comfort is the most beautiful trap ever built. Because the human mind, your mind, is not meant to live in perfect agreement with itself. It's meant to be challenged, stretched, provoked into growth. When you surround yourself only with those who echo your views, your mind doesn't grow stronger. It becomes rigid, brittle, afraid. I once knew a man who only spent time with people who agreed with him about everything. Politics, beliefs, even the smallest opinions. He thought he was wise for doing so. But every day his world grew smaller, until he could no longer tell what was true without asking others what to think. That's the danger of the Hall of Mirrors. It teaches you to fear difference. A new idea feels like an attack. A different opinion feels like betrayal. And before long, you stop thinking altogether and you only repeat. You stop growing and you calcify. You stop becoming more yourself and start becoming less. The only way out is to seek disturbance on purpose. Find voices that unsettle you, not to argue, not to win, but to remember what it feels like to wonder, to not know. That is how a mind breathes again. The arena of comparison. The second place is called the arena of comparison. Here, life becomes a contest. Every joy, every success, every moment measured against someone else's. Someone is always ahead. Someone is always better. This place disguises itself as motivation. We tell ourselves comparison will make us stronger, hungrier, more ambitious. But it doesn't. It drains us. I remember a woman who worked tirelessly for years to earn a promotion, and she got it. But when it came, she felt nothing, because someone else had been promoted higher. Her joy vanished, replaced by quiet despair. That's what the arena does. It turns achievement into emptiness. It convinces you that satisfaction must be earned by outdoing others. But life was never meant to be a race. There is no finish line. There is no universal scoreboard. Your life cannot be compared because it has never happened before. When you live in the arena, you stop doing what brings you peace and start doing what brings applause. You perform instead of live. You calculate instead of create. The escape from this place requires something radical. Stop measuring completely. Not sometimes, always. Do things simply because they delight you, not because they'll impress anyone. Play like a child again, without keeping score. Create without an audience, live without competition, because when you stop comparing, something miraculous happens and your worth stops fluctuating. It becomes constant, grounded in who you are, like not in who you're trying to outperform. Pause. Calm instrumental fades in softly. These first 2 places, the Hall of Mirrors and the arena of comparison, feed on comfort and illusion. One makes you afraid of challenge. The other makes you afraid of being enough. Both pull you away from the only real home you've ever had to yourself, and yet awareness is the first key. You can't leave a prison you don't know you're in. So ask yourself, have you been living among mirrors? Or fighting in the arena? And if so, what might it feel like to simply walk away? There's a place where truth hides behind performance, where every smile is rehearsed, every gesture calculated, and every emotion carefully edited for display. It's called the Theater of Masks, and almost all of us have performed there. The theater of masks here. Authenticity is punished. Performance is rewarded. You learn early that showing your real self is risky. You start curating it, presenting only the parts that seem acceptable, admirable, or useful. And over time, the mask doesn't feel like a disguise anymore, it feels like you. We all wear masks. Of course, it's part of being human. You can't bare your soul to a stranger in line at a store. You can't reveal your deepest fears at work. But in the theater of masks, something far darker happens. The mask becomes permanent. You forget that a face ever existed beneath it. I once knew a man who worked in a place where any sign of weakness meant the end of his career. So, he laughed when he wanted to cry, agreed when he wanted to scream, pretended to care when he felt nothing at all. And slowly, he vanished, not physically, but inwardly. He could no longer tell where the mask ended and the person began. That's what this place does. It doesn't kill the self in one swift blow. It erodes it, slowly, invisibly, until you wake up hollow, performing a role that no longer fits. And the cruelest part? It's exhausting. Every word, every look, every silence becomes a calculation. What should I say? What must I hide? How should I appear? By the time you get home, you're not tired from life. You're tired from pretending to live. But the greatest irony is this. The thing we seek by wearing the mask, belonging, acceptance, connection, is only ever found when we take it off. Because performance creates isolation. People may love you. Yes, but they love the character, not the human behind it. You get attention, not intimacy, approval, not understanding. And in time, that emptiness begins to echo louder than any applause. The way out of this theater is not dramatic. It's tender. It's slow. It begins with small acts of honesty, saying what you actually mean, even when your voice trembles, letting people see you, piece by piece. And yes, some will leave. Those who preferred your mask to your truth. But those who stay, they will see you, and for the first time in a long time, you'll see yourself too. That's not loss, that's liberation. Soft piano begins to play, low and thoughtful. The room of silence now. Let's step into the room of silence, but not the peaceful kind, not the meditative quiet that brings clarity. No, this is a silence that suffocates, a silence that hides pain behind politeness, a silence that says, "Don't rock the boat." Many of us grew up here, families that seemed calm on the surface, no shouting, no open conflict, everything looked fine, but beneath the stillness, there was tension, unspoken grief, unmet needs, words swallowed before they could ever become sound. In this room, emotions are dangerous, pain is weakness, and honesty is betrayal. So, you learn to stay quiet. You bury your needs deep. You smile when your heart aches. And you convince yourself that numbness is peace, but silence doesn't heal, it only buries the wound deeper. Your unspoken words don't disappear. They live on in your body, as anxiety, as heaviness, as exhaustion that never seems to fade. You find yourself surrounded by people, yet feeling unseen, because everyone is participating in the same silent performance. I once met a family that prided itself on never arguing. They saw this as proof of love. But when I spoke to them separately, each one confessed to feeling utterly alone. The mother was depressed but couldn't say it. The father was overwhelmed but had no one to tell. The children learned to smile through their sadness because truth was too expensive to afford. That's what the room of silence does. It doesn't ask you to destroy yourself, and it simply teaches you to disappear quietly. And so, generation after generation, the silence continues, but it doesn't have to. The way out is through gentle truth, not shouting. Not accusation, just honesty. I'm hurting. I need help. This isn't working for me. The silence will resist you. It always does. Because peace built on pretense trembles when truth enters the room, but your liberation, your aliveness is worth that. Tremble, break the silence. Even if your voice shakes, because the moment you speak, you remind the world and yourself that your feelings are not too much, they are simply human. Music fades softer. The theater of masks teaches us to hide. The room of silence teaches us to stay quiet. Both promise safety, but both steal life. The truth is, You cannot be loved if you are not known, and you cannot be known if you do not speak. So, take off the mask, break the silence, and let your real voice, fragile, trembling, beautiful, finally be heard. After the silence comes the noise. It's almost poetic, how one extreme always gives birth to its opposite, from emptiness to overload, from numbness to chaos. We call this next place the storm of noise. The storm of noise here. Silence is feared because silence makes you feel. So we drown it. We fill every second with sound, with screens, with motion, with chatter. Endless scrolling. Notifications. Opinions stacked on opinions. Voices shouting to be heard, yet saying almost nothing at all. The storm of noise isn't just around us. It's inside us. It's the restless mind that refuses to be still. It's the voice that whispers, keep moving, keep checking, keep consuming. We tell ourselves it's connection. We call it staying informed, but deep down we know it's escape. Because the one thing the storm cannot tolerate is quiet. In quiet, the truth appears, and truth is often inconvenient. I once met a young man who couldn't sleep without a podcast playing. He said silence made him feel weird, but when we sat together in a room without sound, his hands began to tremble. After a long pause, he whispered, "It's too loud in here." He didn't mean the room, he meant his own mind. That's what the storm does. It disguises inner chaos as outer busyness. You don't heal. You just distract yourself from the wound. You don't rest. You just collapse. In this world, we mistake stimulation for life. We scroll through tragedy, laughter, anger, and beauty in the span of minutes, and yet, nothing touches us deeply anymore. Because when everything screams for your attention, nothing truly speaks to your soul. The antidote to the storm is not isolation, it's intention. It's learning to sit in quiet without panic, to listen without reacting, to consume without being consumed. Stillness is not the absence of life. It is where life begins to make sense. Again. So if you ever find yourself lost in the noise, close the app, dim the lights, and just breathe. Let the silence feel awkward. Let it scare you a little, because on the other side of that fear is presence. The storm will always rage outside, but peace is built from the inside. And once you learn that, the noise loses its power. Music softens, piano begins again, slower, more melancholy. The chamber of self-betrayal. Now we arrive at the most painful place of all, the chamber of self-betrayal. It's not loud, not even dramatic. In fact, it's so quiet you barely notice when you step inside. It begins with small compromises, the kind that seem harmless at first. You say yes when your heart says no. You laugh at jokes that wound your spirit. You promise yourself you'll speak up next time, but next time never comes because betrayal, like erosion, that happens slowly, one piece of your truth at a time. You start changing your tone to keep the peace. You adjust your dreams to fit someone else's comfort. And before long, you've built an entire life on the foundation of what others expect. I knew a woman once, brilliant, kind, full of wild ideas. She wanted to paint, to travel, to live close to the sea. But she was told that dreams don't pay bills. So she folded herself into a smaller version of who she was, became what was expected, practical, dependable, quiet. Years later, she confessed that she no longer recognized the person in the mirror, not because she had aged, but because she had vanished. That's what self-betrayal does. It doesn't happen in one grand act of defiance. It happens in 1,000 quiet surrenders. And the saddest part? The world applauds it. They call you selfless. They say you're responsible. But deep down, you know, you didn't sacrifice for love or duty. You sacrificed because you were afraid of disappointing others. The cost of that fear is immense. Because every time you say yes to what isn't you, you say no to the life that could have been yours. The chamber of self-betrayal is not built by others. It's built by the choices we make to keep others comfortable. It's built from the walls of politeness, obedience, and approval-seeking. But here's the quiet truth. You cannot betray yourself and still hope to feel whole. You cannot keep shrinking and expect to feel free. Healing begins the moment you choose honesty over harmony, not cruelty, just truth. When you say, "This is what I want. This is who I am. This is what I can no longer pretend to be." At first, the world will resist you. It always does. Because people who benefit from your silence will call your voice rebellion. But don't let that stop you, because every act of self-honesty is an act of homecoming. And every boundary you set is a brick in the foundation of your true life. You will lose people, but you will find yourself, and that trade is sacred. Music swells, calm, inspiring, ethereal. The storm of noise teaches us to run. The chamber of self-betrayal teaches us to forget who we are. But awareness changes everything. Once you name the storm, it begins to quiet. Once you admit your betrayals, healing begins, because truth, once spoken, cannot be unseen. And when you start walking back toward yourself, you'll realize the journey home was never about becoming more, but about remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. Music fades to gentle silence. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize the running has ended. Not because you've reached a destination, but because you've simply stopped moving. For the first time in years, you sit in stillness. The storm has passed, the masks are gone, the silence no longer frightens you. And there, in that tender stillness, you find it, the mirror of return. The mirror of return, it's not a physical mirror, of course. It's a reflection that lives inside you, a mirror that doesn't show your face. It shows your truth. When you stand before it, you don't see perfection. You see scars, regrets, and years of pretending. You see the masks you once wore, the silences you once kept, the noise you once mistook for meaning. At first, it's hard to look, because the mirror doesn't lie. It reflects everything you've avoided. But if you can bear its honesty, and if you can stand there without turning away, something begins to shift. You start to see beauty in the breaking, grace in the imperfection. You realize that every wound was a doorway, a path that led you back to yourself. The mirror doesn't ask you to be flawless. It only asks you to be real. You start to remember the moments before you learned to hide. The laughter that wasn't practiced, the dreams that weren't filtered through fear, the simple joy of being alive without performance, and with that remembering comes something precious. Forgiveness. Forgiveness not for others, but for yourself. For all the times you stayed silent when you should have spoken. For all the times you tried to be everything for everyone. For the years you spent surviving instead of living. You realize you did what you had to do to protect yourself. Even the masks, the silence, the betrayal, they were never your enemies. They were your armor. Heavy, yes, but necessary. And now, it's time to set them down, because healing isn't about becoming who you were before the pain. It's about integrating who you became through it. The mirror of return doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. It whispers, "You are still here. You always were." And as you meet your own reflection with compassion instead of judgment, you begin to feel it. A warmth rising from within, subtle at first, then undeniable. That warmth is life returning. That warmth is you. Music deepens, soft strings and light wine tones blending. The light beyond, and then, one morning and without trying, you notice something has changed. The world hasn't become easier. The people around you haven't transformed, but you have. You wake up with a quieter mind. The silence feels peaceful now. The noise no longer controls you. You move slower, speak truer, breathe deeper. You begin to live from the inside out, not performing, not pretending, just being. That is the light beyond, not a light that blinds, but a light that reveals, not a finish line, but a homecoming. You start noticing beauty in places you once ignored, the way sunlight touches the window, the sound of rain against glass, the simple grace of breathing without rushing. You realize that wholeness was never something to chase. It was something to remember. Because beneath all the noise, the masks, the silence, and the fear, you were always whole. You were always enough. The light beyond doesn't promise a perfect life. It doesn't erase pain. It illuminates it, and it shows you how Even your shadows have shape and purpose when you walk in that light. You no longer seek meaning from the world. You bring meaning to it. You become someone who no longer hides, someone who can sit with sadness without drowning in. It's someone who can love without losing themselves. You become the calm after the storm, the quiet flame that no longer fears the dark, and when others cross your path, those still wearing masks, still lost in noise, still afraid of silence, you won't preach, you won't push, you'll simply be, and your stillness will remind them of their own. Your honesty will remind them of what truth feels like. Your presence will whisper, "You can come home too." That is how healing ripples, not through grand gestures, but through gentle remembrance. Music fades into a soft heartbeat-like rhythm. So, if you've walked through all these chambers, if you've faced the silence, survived the noise, and forgiven yourself for forgetting, then you have already returned. The journey was never about becoming something new. It was about remembering the light that was always inside you, the one that never went out, even in your darkest rooms. You are not broken. You are unfolding. And this moment of awareness is what freedom truly feels like. Long pause. Ambient hum fades into silence. The light beyond, not an ending, but the beginning of finally being whole.